As you can see from my title, I can talk about programs, projects, and training to reduce flood issues. So I can stand up here and I can rattle off 205, 11, 65, Section 22, PAS. It's not going to mean anything to you, and it's going to bore the heck out of me because we're not going to get to any points that I want to make. Or how about if we talk about the NFL? You know, the NFL just went through a draft recently, so are we going to talk about the National Football League? Nope, we're going to talk about the National Flood League. There's only two teams. There's angry Mother Nature on one side, and there's the U.S. on the other side. All of us represent the U.S. Now, if we look at angry Mother Nature, some of her assets that she brings to the game are lightning speed, hurricane force winds, unpredictability. Her vulnerabilities, there's none known. We don't know what her weaknesses are. Her objective, though, is to inflict life loss and property damages. And her skill area is offense. It always seems like Mother Nature is on the offense. On the other side, with Team US, our assets are increasing risk knowledge. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to understand risk and everything. Our determination to stop Mother Nature and our deep pockets. We put a lot of money and resources towards flood risk management in this country, and it takes deep pockets to get there on it. Our vulnerability may be predictability, and I'll get into that here. And our objective is managing flood risk. Back in the 70s, we did flood control. Back in the 90s, we did flood risk management, flood risk reduction. We changed the terminology, but we really haven't changed too much about how we have been performing, trying to stop Mother Nature. So let's go into this a little bit further. We need to know what the playing field is. Well, the playing field is the cities, towns, and communities everywhere. And the line of scrimmage is the rivers and coastlines across the United States. Angry Mother Nature has offensive starters, and she brings rainfall and snowmelt runoff to the game. And the U.S. defensive starters are generally dams and levees, the big structural powerhouses that we have. If we think about the 2011 flood event on the Missouri River, Mother Nature hit us hard and fast up in Montana that year. I mean, she really hit us with everything she had. She had rainfall, she had snowmelt runoff, I mean, everything at the headwaters of the Missouri River. But we, the U.S. team, had one heck of a defensive line. This is something that John Madden would have been proud of. This is something that Mike and Mike would do a podcast over. We brought Fort Peck, Garrison, Oahe, Big Bend, Fort Randall, and Gavins Point dams to the forefront. That was our defensive line. We stacked that line. We should have been able to prevent anything. We thought we could prevent anything, but Mother Nature hit us so hard that she was coming through that defensive line. So what happened then? Once she went through that defensive line, then she met our linebackers. And from Omaha to St. Louis, if you consider our federal levee system as linebackers, she dealt us a blow there. She tried to bend us and break us, and we did pretty good defending against her. These levees have been out there on the river for a lot of years, and they battled Mother Nature a lot of different times. But eventually, she did cause some damage. She broke us in a few locations, and it was very difficult for us because, like I said, our starters in this game against Mother Nature were dams and levees. If you look at the results of that 2011 flood event, it cost us $2.2 billion, and there was 5 fatalities associated with that flood event. In addition to life loss and damages to property, there's tremendous transportation impacts. That photo there shows one of the interstate systems being overtopped and destroyed. When that occurred, people that were commuting from one state to another across the Missouri River had to make round trips that used to be a 20-minute drive for them straight across the river, had to go for hundreds of miles to make it from one location to another. So it completely disrupted transportation. There were excessive emergency costs, there was business losses, and health and welfare expenses. And if any of you have ever been involved in a flood event, either been caught up in a flood or if you've been responding to a flood, you know the stresses involved in that. If we step back and take a look at angry Mother Nature statistics a little bit more, you can see from 1985 to 2016, there's been an annual property damage of about $10.2 billion. $10.2 billion every year since 1985. Some years it's greater than that, some years it's less than that. That's a significant number. That's an extremely high number. The other thing that we need to look at are the weather fatalities associated with these events. I grabbed this information from the National Weather Service. This is for 2015. I want you to look at the left side of the chart there, and the two lower columns where it says flood, there's 82 and 81 fatalities. This goes back to a 30-year average that we used to see 81 or 82 fatalities associated with flooding. In 2015, we jumped up to 155. That's excessive. That's worrisome. There's something wrong when we see that. 2016 numbers are preliminary, but from what I've seen, that number is going to be higher than 155. That's excessive. If we look at this last weekend and the flooding, the storm events that hit the south and came up through the Midwest here, what I heard on the news last night, there were 16 lives lost associated with that storm event that's rolling through the heartland here. That's extreme again. So it seems like Mother Nature's hitting us with everything that she can. What can we do about it? Well, if we're talking about an analogy of football, we can adjust the defense. And in December of 2015, our Director of Planning, Mr. Tab Brown, he did that. He issued a planning bulletin internally within the Corps of Engineers. And if I'm using the analogy of football, where the dams are our front line, our defensive line, and our levees are our linebackers, we're bringing forward these non-structural flood risk adaptive measures that are our secondary. And I'm not advocating get rid of dams and levees. What I'm advocating, let's bring in these bench warmers that we've had and that we haven't used very much in recent years, and let's find a place for them to help reduce risk. So we talk about two different categories of non-structural mitigation measures. We talk about the physical measures that can be implemented on individual structures. So we're talking about acquisition, relocation, or elevation of structures. We're talking about dry floodproofing, preventing water from going into a structure. We're talking about wet floodproofing, allow water to go into a structure without causing damage. And we're talking in parts of the country where there's basements and damages start in that lowest level, either within a basement or a crawl space. Maybe we can remove that basement, move the utilities out of that basement so we're not suffering that type of damage. On the other side of this, we're talking about non-physical measures, and these are more of a floodplain management type of activity. We don't do them on individual structures, we do them within the floodplains. We're talking about floodplain mapping, flood insurance, evacuation planning, flood warning systems, zoning, and emergency preparedness plans. All of these items are coming forward. So in that planning bulletin that was issued within the Corps of Engineers in December of 2015, we've been following up. We've been doing a tremendous amount of workshops and webinars across the country. We're working internally within our agency to get everybody spun up on these techniques. We've talked about these techniques within our agency since the 1970s, but for whatever reason, they kind of went by the wayside and they've been sitting on the bench. Well, now we're starting to bring them forth, and we're re-emphasizing these type of mitigation measures. We've been collaborating with our federal agencies, other federal agencies, our friends. We've been working at the state level, and we've been drilling down into the local community. We're doing a tremendous amount of work. You're not going to see changes overnight. Like in any defensive scheme, it takes time and it takes practice. We're bringing these into the front, and we're trying to combine these type of mitigation measures with our traditional measures of a strong defensive line in dams and a strong linebacking core in levee systems. And we're hoping that this is going to pay off for us. When we talk about the National Flood League, there's some accountability that goes along with that. And this is where I'm going to change directions a little bit. I've got 32 years with the Corps of Engineers. I've been associated with flooding that entire 32 years. Even prior to coming on board with the Corps of Engineers, I experienced some flooding in the Missouri River system growing up, and that's what led me to the Corps of Engineers, very interested in water resources. Within our programs, particularly the National Flood Insurance Program, we look at repetitive loss on structures. We look at residential and commercial structures and the losses they can have through a flood event. So we consider 2 or more claims on any insurable structure that exceeds $1,000 or more in property damages with any 10-year period. We call that repetitive loss. And we're targeting that because we don't like to see those type of losses, and we want to get mitigation to those. We want to reduce those numbers. Okay, here's where I'm going to go off track a little bit, and this is Randy's opinion on some things. What about repetitive loss infrastructure? Why aren't we considering that? This is a busy slide that I have here, but the 2 round circles indicate 5 areas of previous flood damage along a federal levee system on the Missouri River. What we've done, each time these were damaged under our programs, we go back in and we repair them. We repair them in place. We dump a lot of money into it. We don't do that with repetitive loss structures. We try to mitigate them completely and remove them. But why aren't we doing that on repetitive loss infrastructure? That's something to me that we need to consider. After the 2011 flood event on the Missouri River, we had an opportunity where the Missouri River levee breached a couple times, about 120 miles north of us here, near Highway 2 between Iowa and Nebraska. We had a couple levee breaches, significant damage, and right off the bat, we're looking at repairing in place. What was so impressive, while at a meeting in Des Moines, Iowa, where we brought federal and state agencies together, a landowner came in and he spoke up and he says, why can't we do something different? He was born and raised on this property along the Missouri River. And in his lifetime, he had seen damage so many different times where the levee had broken and his land was flooded and it was decimated. He saw it with his dad, he saw it with himself, and now he's seen it with his own children that are farming that same land. So we had the opportunity. We worked across boundaries. We worked with other federal agencies. We worked with the state, the county, and local communities. And we were able, and if you're able to tell from the slide here, we set that levee back from the river. Quite a ways back from the river, in some locations about 2 miles back from the river. Very, very significant. We did this at 2 different locations along the Missouri River for a total of somewhere between 6 and 7 miles in length. These are massive levee setbacks, and we had the support of the landowners on this. And once they got behind it, then the other agencies, the state and federal agencies, got behind this also. And what we saw with this levee setback is the fact that it's an alternative to repairs in place. For flood risk considerations, we're seeing lower stages. Right after we completed these levee setbacks, we had a high water event, and we saw the stages were significantly lower than what we'd seen in the past. Well, it's the high stages and high velocities that are eroding and damaging these levee systems. Since we have lower stages, interior drainage flows were able to come through into the system. The gates weren't shut, the flap gates weren't closed. They had lower stages. We were able to drain that interior area where water had collected traditionally and drowned out so many of the farm fields and damaged homes and so forth. So we were able to do that. We've also obtained environmental benefits from this, and we reconnected the historic floodplain, and it's significant. We had a team in Omaha that worked on this, very significant. I remember after the 1993 flood event on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, out there flood fighting, and then the report that was developed after that by retired General Galloway. Some really neat ideas, innovation were brought forward on it, and I just felt like we've never had that opportunity to move forward. 2011, we had that opportunity. We had the backing of our district commander. We had the backing of our division commander, a general out of Portland, and we moved forward on this, and we set these levees back, and it looks to me like they've been very, very successful. In some areas, the lands were already owned by federal agencies, and in other areas, they were privately owned, and the private landowner said, hey, it's okay, on wet years, the rainwater and stuff would collect behind the levees. Our crops are damaged back there. We might not be able to damage landward or riverward of the levee, But on dry years, we can probably farm very well, both on the landward side and the riverward side, so I'm very pleased. I would love to talk more about this if anyone can stop me in the hallway, but I also want to point out if Tony Krause is in the room. Tony's out of the Omaha District. Tony was a very, very key player in this out of the Omaha District as part of our team on trying to develop these setbacks, and I think we did a great job on doing that. This is a recent photo of one of the setback areas, and this is part of the environmental habitat that we have there. The borrow pits, they weren't your rectangular vertical side slope borrow pits. These had varying levels of slope all the way around them, so as the water came up and came down, the wildlife could get to the water's edge. We're seeing an abundance of waterfowl that's migrating through there, and there's all kinds of other reptiles and so forth that are doing very well in this area. With that, I'd like to leave this group a question. If we continue to do what we've always done, why do we expect different results every time? And we always do. So I'd like to welcome you this week to the ASFPM National Conference, to our National Flood League. Consider this your training camp. For the rest of the week, ponder these things, work together, because it's all of us in this room that are going to make the changes. We're going to make the differences in the future. We're the ones that are going to make those adjustments in defense that are going to stop angry Mother Nature. Thank you very much.